Everyone that's joined so far, welcome to, I think, the third session of the Biotech Commercialization Series. We're going to give it a couple of minutes just so that the numbers can go up, and then we'll kick it off. Awesome. I'm gonna kick things off with a bit of an intro, and we'll let people join as we start things off. But to anyone new, I'm Hannah from the OneBio Innovation Center, along with my colleagues Erin and Rodrigue, who are in the backstage of this webinar today. And this is the Biotech Commercialization Series. So we're kicking off July's theme, which is building your team and refining your idea. Again, to give you a bit of background of our thinking around this whole series, we're really just trying to bring some conversations to the stage that we have internally and things that we found really important and really interesting, some common threads between founding teams, and just a great opportunity to bring the whole ecosystem together online and to start having these conversations and see what you guys have been thinking about, and kind of give you an opportunity to join in on what OneBio is doing. So the way that we thought about this month was they seem like two very obvious themes and things that you will think about, of course, in the beginning of starting to think about your biotech startup. But they actually are very important themes and things that can often be overlooked, and sometimes things that can be your kind of make or break, whether it's your team composition or refining your idea early before looking for investment or before committing to build what you're thinking of building. Yeah, so I'm going to jump into a bit of an introduction to what we're going to be speaking about today, and then later on we'll be joined by our guest speakers. Bit of housekeeping again, we can't see the audience, so if you do have questions, please pop them in the public chat. Rodrigue is backstage and he'll make sure that we see them and answer them. If you have any suggestions, please also pop them in the chat. And if you have any follow-ons, you can always email us at info at innovation.onebio.africa, but we'll put that on screen later as well. So today's session, as I mentioned, I'm going to give a bit of a speaker introduction. And then for the first half, we're joined by the Novo Food Labs team, who I'll introduce in a second. We'll have some Q&A time, a short break in between, and then we'll be joined by Gian-marco, who I will call Marco, for those of you who don't know. And he'll be speaking about stress testing your ideas and give us some background about what's happening with the OneBio Fund as well as the OneBio Venture Building team. So again, why did we kind of choose these themes? When we thought about this series, we really just tried to kind of put ourselves in your shoes and think about what are the early stage conversations that are happening? What are some things that founders or scientists by themselves might be thinking of and might want to kind of hear firsthand from founders who have been through this? So building your team composition can often be your make or break. So we're going to speak to Richard and Joni about their team. The Novo Food Labs team has a really interesting story and quite a big team at the early stages. And then refining your idea, obviously, it's very difficult to put yourself in the investor's point of view. So hearing it firsthand from Marco kind of gives you that lens, and you can understand how to test your idea before approaching for investment. Again, quite obvious kind of conversations, but I think they're definitely worth having. And this is broken up into our 2 sessions. So to give you a bit of an intro to the speakers for each of these sessions, we're going to be speaking to Richard and Joni for building your team. The Novo Food Labs team, Richard and Joni are 2 of 4 co-founders that I'll give you an overview in a second. And they built Novo Food Labs, which aims to scale lactoferrin, a high-value functional protein, to help transform the global protein supply for human nutrition. So, as I mentioned, they are 2 of 4, and the Novo Food Labs team really shows how kind of a real example of this complementary mix that we'll be speaking about. Gian is the CEO, Leah the CSO, Richard the CTO, and Joni is the lead protein R&D. So this kind of the full team brings together commercial, science, engineering, and R&D. And we're going to hear how their skills were complementary, how they formed this founding team, and then how they went on to build a really strong early stage team beyond the founding team. So Richard and Joni, a bit of a direction for our conversation today. We really just want to hear the real story of Novo Food Labs, how you guys met, how this founding team came about, how your kind of complementary skills overlapped and how they diverged, and how you kind of used this to your advantage and how you identified each of your scope, how that kind of doesn't really work in an early stage team and where there was a lot of creep. And then the co-founder relationship, an honest relay of what you guys have had challenges with, what you've experienced, what you've learned, and maybe what you would do differently. And then spotting the skill gaps as you went on to build the rest of your team and looked at your first hires and kind of how this can create challenging environments for trying to get the work done or how it can be an advantage. And then for the audience, a bit of a question, something to have fun with. Who would you want to build? Who would you want beside you in building your biotech company? And what would they need to bring to the table? Have you identified your own skill gaps? Cool. So let's get into it. I'm going to ask Roddy to put Joni and Richard on stage so we can see some pretty faces. And then I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see ourselves even bigger. There we go. Hi, Richard. Hi, Joni. Thank you for joining today.
Hi, Anna. Good to be here.
So as I mentioned, I'm going to kind of hand it over to you guys to give a little bit more of an introduction to De Novo and to yourselves. And then we'll start speaking about the lovely founding team that was De Novo.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for having us. I see we've got a lot of chat ahead of us. Those of you who know me will know that I love to chat. So yeah, brilliant to be here. We've already been introduced, but I'm Richard, one of the 4 co-founders of Novo Food Labs, COO and CTO eventually of the company. So my responsibilities over the last few years have been basically all of the back office, all the boring stuff at the startup, I guess, as well as kind of leading our upscale operations. So taking everything from the lab, from the bench, and trying to make it commercially workable. And I'll give it to Joni to just give a little bit of background about herself, and we can start chatting about how we found each other.
Cool. So yeah, so Joni, as you all know by now. So I'm a protein biochemist by training. And so my role at De Novo was mostly actually working directly in the R&D, directly working in the labs, directly working on protein innovation, protein pipeline. Basically everything that starts with the word protein was my job. And I'm currently also finishing up a PhD at Stellenbosch University, which I took on kind of halfway through De Novo's life, also specializing in lactoferrin and understanding the protein better.
Do you want to start with where the two of us kind of know each other from?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, we co-founded De Novo about 5 years ago. So that was in around 2021. So Richard and I have been friends for actually at this point, probably like 15 years. At that point, we'd been friends for like a decade. We'd known each other from like university, similar circles. Actually mutual friend. And when we co-founded De Novo, I had just finished up my master's in biochemistry, and I was looking for a job. And alternative protein was something really interesting that was happening all over the world. A lot of people were trying to replace like dairy proteins with recombinant alternatives. And there actually was really very little opportunity for that in South Africa. There was a very small ecosystem for it. So I was like, okay, that damn, gonna have to start a company if I want to pursue this avenue and remain in South Africa. And I sort of knew immediately that Richard was the person to go to for this because, like, I mean, we within our like friendship had been kind of joking around starting something for years, but this was serious pretty much from the get go. I mean, Richard can talk more about this, but I kind of knew that this was very serious because Richard was an employed man at the time that we were co-founding the company, and he ended up quitting his job to pursue it. So that was a pretty strong signal. And how Leah and John, our other co-founders, fit into the picture is we'd been working on De Novo and the concept and figuring it out for a couple of months. And we found out from a mutual connection, or a connection in the space, that there were two people in Cape Town who were really interested in working on a similar concept. And so we were introduced to them over a video call because we were still in Joburg at this point, and we clicked really well with them. We had really diverse skills, and we were like, okay, I mean, I guess we should just bring our companies together then. And that was kind of that. And we started figuring out how to move from Cape Town, like from then onwards, because they already had some lab space. And yeah, I guess guess the rest of it is history.
Yeah, I think. Not this is like not the thing I think everyone expects to hear or kind of almost reads about in like books about startups. But I mean, Joni and I did know each other for a really long time, and John and Leah had known each other as well. They were also friends previously. But in terms of the two pairs coming together, I mean, we had literally about two calls, and we had both just started to consider raising capital for because we were looking at doing almost exactly the same thing. And when we spoke the first time, we realized that we were trying to start the same company. And one thing we were all four of us reliant on is we didn't want to compete with each other in South Africa in such a small space. There was no sort of intention to do that at all. So we were interested definitely in pairing up, and literally within 2 weeks, we literally were just like, you know what, we're willing to roll the dice on this. We don't know you that well, but basically intuitively we clicked, and first impressions were good enough. And we combined pitch decks, and we raised our first capital within a month of that. So like before Joni and I had even successfully relocated, we'd combined pitch decks, pitched as one unit as four co-founders. as though we'd known each other for a million years. And yeah, I mean, we formed the Novo within 2 weeks of meeting them, really. So I think,
Now I'm kind of realizing that maybe you guys are the worst ones to speak to about this because it
yeah,
happens so easily.
it is something we like kind of warn people about with the story, because, you know, perhaps we were very fortunate or very lucky in the sense that did work out relation, you know, as a quadruple or whatever. You know, we all worked together really, really well over the 5 years. We didn't really have, like, I mean, there are challenges which we can get into later, which come with maybe actually like a really good founder relationship. There are some hidden challenges to that, actually. Um, but yeah, I mean, we were very fortunate, but I wouldn't understate the importance of intuition, and gut feel, and sort of your first impression of people. It comes around again and again with team. Like, if you ignore your intuition because someone looks good on paper or something, it always backfires. Whereas, you know, taking something on gut feel can pay off. Although I suppose there are also, one should probably check references as well.
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like obviously, okay, it came together quite seamlessly or seamlessly enough, the meeting of the quadruple. But how did the conversation then roll out after making this decision? Okay, cool, we are wanting to do the same thing, we're all really passionate about it. Then how did you go further with your discussion of, okay, let's divide roles, who's bringing what to the table? It was also very great that it just naturally all had different skills that kind of lend to different aspects of the business. But how did that then roll out after that? Okay, we're doing this. Now let's start speaking about team composition and what we're all going to manage across the board.
Yeah, I think initially we had to make a very quick decision about how we presented the structure, because we wanted to put this on a pitch deck and raise capital on the back of it. So we were under right at the start. We actually wanted to present ourselves almost in like a flat structure with like no titles, because we hadn't had the chance to really think about it that carefully. And then, you know, in a startup, especially for us, it was like, I mean, you call yourself the CEO, there's like 4 people. I mean, it seemed a little bit like much, to give ourselves C-level titles. But we found, particularly, we went mainly to raise capital in the US. They demand to see that, and there's a good reason for it, actually. But so we were under pressure very early on to make the call about how we were going to title ourselves, because it needed to be on the deck within like a week. I think initially, I mean, so we made the decision between us to kind of lean into each of our skill sets, basically, for the titles. I mean, Jean had the business background. The idea was that he would be responsible for raising money chiefly as the CEO, which is something we kept for the whole of de Novo's lifetime. So he was the sort of natural choice for CEO. I mean, I had an operational background already, so we were just like, great, there's another C-level title for that. And then, I mean, for Leah and Joni, I mean, perhaps it's best for you to kind of elaborate on that.
Yeah, I mean, it was also pretty obvious with us. I was straight out of university at that point, and I kind of wanted to work directly in the lab, lean into my lab skills. So Leah was a more natural choice for a CSO. She'd previously founded another company, more experienced. And yeah, I mean, that was kind of how those roles were established.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we made a conscious choice that it would present better, to the investors, right? We didn't want to have to explain like, oh, whatever. I mean, this is just what we thought at the time. So a lot of it was frankly based on how it would present, like on a pitch deck. We lent into what seemed like it made the most sense at the time.
I mean, if we put ourselves in the shoes of a founder who's looking to start something but hasn't had a great group of friends come together that perfectly form a founding team, obviously it's a little bit more challenging then. You can't just really identify the skills that are already in front of you. But just putting yourself in those shoes, if you had to go back, Joni and Richard didn't know each other back then. Leah and Jean didn't really come to the table. Do you think you would have thought about it the same way of, okay, these are the skills that I need to go out and specifically identify these people? How important do you think that would be versus going and meeting someone or reaching out to your existing network, to people that you trust, and building, even if you don't maybe have complementary skills or you're not filling a skills gap? If you get what I'm saying, would you really go and identify those skills that you now know were super important for building de novo? Or would you first just find someone that you trust to build this with? I mean, both are
I
important, you know.
exactly. I think this is very, very subjective. I think, it is. I mean, I know a lot of like solo. I've met a lot of solo founders like over time who've got like a really great idea and a lot of skills and really need at least one more co-founder. And it is important, I think, in biotech, you've got to have at least two people. There's just too much to do. And a lot of investors won't invest, I think, if unless in very exceptional circumstances. So you've oftentimes got to go out and find someone else to help you, at least one other person. I think the trust is really important. I think, I don't think personally, like if I wasn't already with one person I knew really well, I don't think I would have taken the gamble on two other people I didn't know well. So some people do it and it works out, but it's really hard. You're basically getting married. Like when you pick a co-founder, like if things are going well, you're going to be in the trenches with this person in a biotech startup for at least 5 years, like minimum kind of thing. And you're going to be put in like really awful situations, and you need to trust that person. I think trust really is the main thing. You need to trust them. It's not so much even a question of the exact skills. You can hire in skills you don't have between you. But you really need to know that person and trust them. I think it's very difficult in my mind, honestly, to have if there's only two of you, to have a person you don't really know at all, as a co-founder, even if they have like incredible skills on paper, you're really rolling the dice on what's less than 50-50, I think, if how that's gonna work out.
I agree. I mean, not being a founder myself, but I've seen what founders go through at the early stages, and really having that person to lean on is super important, which is one of the reasons we want to have this conversation, right? A lot of the time when we're speaking to kind of early career scientists and through this whole commercialization series, we really realize like that early stage meeting who you're building with and really getting aligned with them is so important, because it can bite you later on and be the make or break of the whole company. Someone popped a question in the chat. Could you maybe expand on why it is important to have this clear separation of roles in a small company? And maybe with that, also explain how that overlaps. I mean, with such a small team and so much to do building from scratch, obviously everyone has to wear all of the hats all of the time. But as you started evolving and as you started hiring more people into the team and really building out the de novo team beyond the founding members, how did that become increasingly important? And did you have to ever go back to the drawing board and really go, okay, we have to now redefine our scope, redefine who's doing what, and make some more clear separations? Or how did it go for you guys?
It's a lot of questions.
It's one whole big question to dissect.
I think I think Joni would be the best person to speak on so the second half of that question. I mean, quickly, I just want to talk about the first bit, which is the clear separation, and how important it is. I think early on, like I said, like the presentation to the investors, they kind of demand to see this, and the reason for that is because of who's ultimately responsible for a thing. So you're all you're all going to be doing everything at a startup. Like there's no getting away from that. So those roles are not clearly defined in practice. Like you're doing a lot of everything, and then you should, I think, be hands on. I think a mistake we made was at one stage trying to be too forceful with like, you know what, I'm operations. I'm not going to look at science. That's not my job. I shouldn't bother with that kind of thing. And we tried that for a while. And it was a waste of time, I think, at the end, counterproductive even. But the thing that is important is the who's responsible for what thing. And that comes down to strategy. Like someone's got to set the vision for a particular vertical. I think in biotechs, the key person is the CSO, basically. That person can be the CEO as well, essentially, but the person who sets the strategic pathway for the science, one person really needs to be ultimately responsible for that. I think it's crucially important. If everyone's kind of pulling in different directions on what should happen in the development of the IP, basically, it kind of spreads responsibility, and I think it means that tough decisions tend to get made late. It starts to become a problem before of you come together and are like, shit, this is a disaster. We need to make a call on it, because it's not one person's job to sit and think about that exclusively.
Yeah, and maybe over to Joni. This is a very random question. I'm jumping the timeline a little bit, but when you decided to start your PhD midway through building de Novo, how was that kind of with the team? Did you guys set specific expectations around your timeline for building de Novo, what the expectations were from you as a team and your commitments to building this? And how was it kind of juggling the two?
Yeah, so I mean, we actually had a very cool grant from the government. It's called the THRIP grant, and essentially, the goal of the grant is to have startups working or companies working directly with the university, mostly to try and funnel the students directly from like university into working environments. And so the government gives you some money. We work directly with the university. We have a PI there. That PI takes charge of some specific like company research. So we had this collaboration with Stellenbosch University, and it allowed for us to basically develop a little kind of research lab at Stellenbosch University with a PI and students, and a couple of people that side working on de novo research. And so I was one of the students involved in that grant. And actually, Leo was the person who was pushing me to do the PhD. So it definitely wasn't just me being like, okay, cool guys, I'm going to do a PhD. And like, this is, what she actually was the person who was like, listen, I think in terms of where this company's going, and like, I guess, especially if, I mean, as the company grows, if you're a scientific leader, it's obviously very beneficial to have a PhD for a very, I guess, in some ways, superficial reason that, there'll be PhDs and people who are much more experienced under you someday. And so it was something that kind of had to happen, also from the perspective of like the company's needs. And so 100% there were timelines in I guess a lot of what I was doing day to day in the lab did have direct overlaps with the PhD, which made it doable. If the PhD was completely separate from what I was doing day to day, it wouldn't have been possible. So that was kind of the only way that it was working.
Yeah, understood. So definitely complementary to what you guys are doing and kind of suited the journey. And then maybe, I mean, this is something that we've also spoken about at OneBio, the same kind of conversation. Something that really gets overlooked is like founder wellness in the beginning. As you mentioned, you really are in the trenches together as you go through your first 5 years. You really get to know each other, get to know the pain points. How did you guys go about that? I mean, was it just that you were this perfect serendipitous team that worked together and never had to kind of troubleshoot? Or was it something in the beginning you realized, okay, we really do have to integrate some sort of routine or some sort of team building? And I want to then starts really speaking about, well, you answer this question, start speaking about when new people joined and when you went from a founding team to kind of a management team as well, where you had people reporting to you and you started building out different responsibilities with different people. Yeah, so another layered question that you can go with.
Um, yeah, I mean, so there's a lot that can be said about all that. I think so. So we obviously, when you start with a big founding team, it's the one advantage is you start instantly with a lot of people to do work. So you're probably not under the same pressure to hire quickly. So mostly it was the founding team, and we had one additional employee like at the start. So there was just 5 of us for quite a while actually. So there's not a lot of people. I mean, you all fit in one room. You see each other every day. And that being said, we did early on like think to ourselves like, and I think we over-engineered a little bit. We were like, we should really be careful about wellness. We're in a tough environment. We should all get to know each other, and like we did like personality tests on everyone, and all of this stuff. Like, so we kind of borrowed a lot of like corporate stuff, and we I think we just wanted to see like how effective it would be. So we dabbled in all of this stuff quite early on, without we didn't wait for there to be a problem to kind of see how all of this would benefit us or not, which I think is worth doing. I mean, like as an engineer, like I think I could maybe speak for a lot of people in like STEM fields. You're pretty cynical about like a lot of the soft skills stuff coming in. It wouldn't have occurred to me personally to like push all of this so early, but it was good to see what's out there, and cynical as you can be about the accuracy of personality tests and all of that, doing all of that and just knowing what's out there was actually tremendously useful. And the thing is, then some years in, that stuff started to pay dividends. So early on, the going isn't necessarily that tough, and yeah, we did get on very well. The difficulty though with getting on very well by default is that you kind of feel in some respects it's harder to bring up issues, I think. So over time there are some issues and you don't want to kill the vibe basically. So it actually makes it a little bit challenging, I think, in some weird ways to bring up difficulties as opposed to a person you're like fighting with every day, I suppose. But we did start early with this. And the one thing I kind of put in my notes to mention on this call definitely is something that's crucial is to like have mediation capacity somewhere. So for us, it was the person who like did our personality tests, a woman called Marissa. She was great. And she administered these tests, whatever, but she also could act as a mediator. So we used to have these meetings once a quarter where the 4 founders would go meet with her, and she would mediate like a discussion where we would just talk about like whatever was going on in the company. And it's interesting that when you have a mediator, you could feel that you can bring up some things you've been sweeping under the rug for like the last quarter. And some of our more important, I think, personnel like decisions about like that were hard to make were prompted as a result of that mediation. And I think the other thing that helps with a 4-person founding team is that in some situations, then you've got a founder who can kind of mediate as well between like 2 other founders, I think. I think in like a 2-person founding team, it's essential to have someone who can kind of mediate for you because, day-to-day operations, you're busy, there's a lot going on, you're under a lot of pressure to make decisions and be very action-oriented. And almost always there's going to be stuff that goes unsaid. And no matter what you think, a mediator will kind of like get it out of you in that kind of conversation. And I can't recommend that enough. That's tremendously useful. And we got along well, and there were still things that absolutely required like mediation, like, like people shouting, people crying. I promise you the works. Like it's absolutely necessary.
I like what you said about, because I have a feeling this is probably resonates with a lot of people on the call, that as a technical person, as a scientist, a lot of the time that is your like your main focus. That's your priority. So oftentimes we do sweep these, let's say, HR related things under the rug and let that kind of come up naturally. And sometimes we don't really use preventative methods. We just let it happen and then deal with it later. Joni, was it the same for you? I mean, you also have a very technical brain, scientist brain. And who was the one to really push the mediator, the founder wellness from the beginning?
Yeah, so it definitely was the same for me. Something else that I also experienced, I mean, from the beginning, I wouldn't necessarily call it like a huge problem, but I think because we were like kind of two sets of two people coming together with very different skills, I think another thing that was happening was in terms of communication, sometimes, I mean, I can speak from my own experience. I thought I was communicating very clearly on something scientific. The kind of people with a more commercial background would interpret that in a different way. And so there was kind of seemingly communication, but it was actually a lot of miscommunication. So I think also kind of getting to know each other's communication styles, that was something that was very beneficial through like the personality testing, not because the tests themselves kind of said it, but it kind of encouraged people to talk a little bit more about like how they communicate and really understand each other, and then maybe understand where some of those like gaps in communication was coming through. And I actually, once again, will credit Leah for pushing this from the beginning. I think she actively went out and spoke to other founders to try and figure out what makes a good founder relationship. And so from the start, she was already pushing kind of like ensuring that we as founders continue talking to each other. She spoke to, I remember this right in the beginning, she said that she asked a set of founders how they succeeded for like 10 years, and their advice was having dinner with each other every week. I don't know if that would have necessarily worked in our context, but the mediation definitely did.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Sorry.
I'm going to jump to some. Did you have something to add? I was going to jump to some questions in the chat.
But yeah, I was
Richard,
going
do
to
you want
say,
to add something?
yeah, they popped up. That it pops up like this big on my screen. So I was going to
Giant.
say that we used the I see a couple of questions. We used the Enneagram personality test. I think I Enneagram was cool. We liked it. I don't think the type of test is as important as just going through the exercise. Um, you know, the tests are a little bit gameable. Like scientific people also like when the extended team does it, they themselves are quite cynical about it oftentimes. But going through the exercises is useful, and we found it kind of took the edge off people's cynicism a little bit. They all like, this is a bunch of bullshit, and then they do it, and they're actually discover all these heartfelt things that the STEM people are burying deep down. So yeah, going through the exercise is important. In terms of, did you find it effective in understanding the teammates? Once again, I think it was more the activity for me that was more insightful about how teammates communicate and what their personalities are like than the act and like reading the report. I mean, you do get these interesting things in these reports, like this person, if you really want to convince them of if you want to really show them your point of view as because you take both sides of the person. It's like as an 8, which is me on the Enneagram thing, an action-oriented person. When you speak to this person, like, bear this in mind, like you're gonna come down on them too hard or whatever it is. So it does get you thinking, but it's more the going through the motion of it than the result, I think.
Yeah, so more just realizing from the get-go, we're in this together for the long run. This is going to be pretty hard, and then putting into practice just things to mediate any kind of challenges that could come up, or making the space just to see each other as humans going through a similar experience is always important. I'm going to accelerate a little bit because we'll be having a break in about 10 minutes, and there are quite a few more questions we want to get through. There was one more in the chat that was just about meeting people. So if you don't already have a network, what's the best way to proactively find, connect with, and evaluate potential co-founders who are complete strangers? I maybe will toot our own horn of OneBio and say really just get out there and meet as many people as you can in the same space. Obviously, de novo, you guys were lucky enough to, Joni and Richard, you guys knew each other for a very long time. You do hear that as a common story. A lot of the time, it is friends who were founders who had been discussing ideas for a long time, or who had met through their research or academic journey, and always kind of thought that they were complementary in building something together. So oftentimes it can be within your network, and just starting to speak to friends who maybe have the same ambitions as you, same passions, or people who you kind of identify your own skill gaps and go, oh, I know this person who I really trust and who would be really interesting to speak to, and they might be in the business field or something. So I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that. I would say just really putting yourself out there and networking and being quite intentional about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Yeah, there's not a secret. I mean, friends is good because you know them, but on the other hand, your friend circle is probably not that huge, and you know, starting a company requires a very particular like neurological disorder. So perhaps your friends aren't the right. And it is a mistake to reach out to a person just because they're a friend. I think as well that wouldn't be a good reason to burden them with startup co-foundership. I think coming to places like OneBio or the labs or universities, places where there are a lot of people doing similar things, is the place to do it. But I mean, I know co-founders who've literally been like, "Hey, I've got this idea," and they put it up on like a message board, and they're like, "Who wants to build this with me?" And random strangers appear, and then they've made it work. So I mean, don't feel put out like if you don't have an immediate friend or relation who's like a co-founder material. I mean, ambitious people find each other, I find.
Yeah, and I definitely think this is something that people might find challenging. If you do have an idea and you've been working on it solo, or you've been working on it with friends, but they don't necessarily want to start a company with you, we are trying to troubleshoot for that, and creating some more networking events, which I'll mention later, that really are to facilitate this and bring people together who are looking to start something and potentially in the same field. So I think it was Leandra. Look out for that. We'll send you guys some more resources. And then back to a few more questions before we go on break. After the break, we'll be speaking to Marco more from the kind of investor lens. But maybe in your guys' experience, how important was the team dynamic and who you had in your team when you were looking for investment? Did you get these questions a lot? Did they kind of investigate a lot about you personally? Do you think that that was your biggest asset at some point? And how much did you leverage it?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it was a bit of a mixed bag. Some investors absolutely loved the fact that we were four co-founders, completely different skills. I think something that a lot of them did emphasize is a worry with four co-founders is who has the final word. So as long as that's something that's clearly communicated in the investor meetings, they usually they found it appealing that obviously there's a lot of people available to kind of fill those initial roles, and so you don't have to go out and hire for specific skills early on. Other investors were a little bit put off by how big the founding team is, how obviously a lot of the initial stuff will be split, the more potential for, I suppose, disagreement or like differing opinions. But I think also we were raising funds in a time where the area we were working in was very, very, very hot. And so there was definitely, mostly in the early stages, a lot of due diligence on us as people. But yeah, I guess like there was quite a lot of funds to be distributed into alternative proteins. So people were really just, I guess, excited about the space.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what Johnny said. I think on the whole, actually, people preferred in the biotech space the larger founding team um, as an idea, because a lot of investors had seen solo founders and duos struggling and failing. Um, but I mean, the thing I would emphasize is early stage investors are investing in the founding team. So there is no more important decision to make early on, and that is what the investors are looking at. So, I mean, Michael will talk later on the importance of refining your idea as you go. But your initial idea, I mean, almost certainly is not what you're going to be doing in 3 years or even a year. And investors understand this. And as a result, what they're looking at really is the founding team. They're asking 2 questions, right? Do you have like a big vision that has that's going to pay down the line? So if you do succeed, will it be big? And then do you have the skills to succeed? And it's not the technical skills or like, can you do, a Western blot? It's can you persevere through all of the complete unknowns that are coming your way as a startup? Will you identify the fact that shit, I actually need a third co-founder, like after 3 months, you bring someone in or anything like, so they're basically looking for people who are prepared for any unknown eventuality. And that assessment is made entirely off the back of how you present as a founding team. So the due diligence is all like about you basically as individuals. And the vibe they get, they work off intuition. So how you present, how you appear, do they feel like you can do it? Because I mean, nothing on paper really is that suggestive of whether you'll succeed. So it's basically entirely vibes based, basically. I mean, they do DD down the line on certain things, but that's box checking. I mean, they only do that if they feel like basically that you as a group of people will succeed. And I will also add that some investors, good investors, often if you pitch like as a solo founder and they feel like you've got what it takes, they'll be like, you need another person, but they'll help you find another person. That's pretty common because investors get a lot of pitches from solo founders and they're like, cool, we can put these 2 people together and they can do something cool. So I would say that don't feel like you shouldn't speak to investors and people like that if you're just one person or 2 people and you think you need a third person, because that is another way to find people is at the funds. The investors themselves won't turn away a brilliant person permanently just because you're missing a potential team member. They can connect you with someone, and it happens often. A lot of good founding teams come about that way.
I love that to be like the front page of a VC company. Just we go vibes based investing.
Yeah, I mean,
That's great.
they won't say that exactly, but the vibe's 80% of the job, I think.
Yeah. Well, awesome. So we're going to go on break in 2 minutes. I was going to say pop more questions in the chat, but I see Stephen did already. Joni mentioned communicating clearly from a scientific perspective, but sometimes communicating with people from other backgrounds with different communication styles resulted in miscommunication. Could you please elaborate on this and provide advice as to how to understand another person's communication style and communicate accordingly?
Yes, definitely. So, I mean, when I say it's miscommunication, I think probably what jumps to mind is too technical, but that isn't even what I'm getting at with this. I think, as a scientist, especially coming from a very technical background where you work in a lab and you spend your days optimizing and feeling optimistic, like, oh, if I just change this one variable, it will work. We're so close. We just need a couple more weeks. So I think being able to kind of like not oversell the optimism on something working and kind of be realistic and look at it and be like, okay, this is how much progress we've made over the past 3 weeks. We actually really aren't getting anywhere with this in terms of like how it's lining up to our commercial goals. So you've kind of always got to contextualize your scientific findings in terms of how much closer you're getting to your actual like commercial goal, and not just kind of reporting on the weekly or the daily, because that can then sometimes be taken as, oh, we're moving in a positive direction, when really we're kind of moving in no direction, but we're positive that we might go somewhere sometime soon.
Yeah. I'm going to have to cut us off in a minute. If anyone has a burning question, please put it in the chat. But otherwise, Richard and Joni frequent our Biotech and Beers. So if you are wanting to chat to them a little bit more about the de novo story, I really encourage you to join us in person. If you can't and you're really looking at chatting a little bit more, you're interested in both of their personal backgrounds and in forming de novo and the de novo food lab story, let us know, and we can always record another longer session about their full founding journey. Otherwise, we are going to go on break now. Thank you, Joni and Richard. If you do have time, you're welcome to join and listen in on the next session. which is looking at the investor perspective and what's happening at OneBio, how they look at kind of due diligence, how important the founding team is from the investor's perspective. Otherwise, thank you guys for joining, and everyone else, look out for more information on Joni and Richard doing very cool things, and we'll be back after the break. Thank you guys. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.
Awesome. Sorry about that. Let me just get us up on screen again. Awesome. We're back. Everyone can see my screen. Can you give a thumbs up? Can't see any thumbs up. Oh, there we go. Awesome. So welcome back. Thank you for staying after the break. We're going to be joined in a second with Marco and get into refining your idea. So we're flipping the lens now and looking from the investor's perspective and from a venture building perspective, how we think about the kind of very early stages after you've found the right co-founder, after you've started building your team. How do you start looking at doing your own due diligence? And beyond the founding team, both the founding team and the early stage idea, what do investors look for when they're looking into new companies? So a little bit of background. He will give a bit more details himself, but OneBio and OneBio Venture Studio builds and backs early stage biotech across Africa. Gian-marco Melfi is a partner at OneBio, but we call him Marco. So Marco leads venture building and investment strategy, turning research into companies that can actually raise. He has great international experience working with startups like Gyroscope Therapeutics, acquired by Novartis, and has helped establish the Cambridge's Milner Therapeutics Institute. Then came back home to bring all this experience back to South Africa, and has been kind of instrumental in setting up the whole umbrella of organizations at OneBio. So a bit of background of what OneBio is doing right now. Obviously, from our side, the OneBio Innovation Center, most of you know about us, so I won't get into that. But two other sides of OneBio, where Marco plays a big role, is in the fund manager, of course, investing in early stage biotech companies, both at pre-seed and seed stage. They've closed their first fund and are nearing the close of their second fund, and have started deploying their second fund. So backing founders with the capital to get from lab to a real venture. And then something really new and exciting this year is the Venture Build program, where they are taking a hands-on approach to building companies from the ground up. They're really identifying high potential founders and then pairing them with some great venture opportunities to really try and accelerate the translation of science in South Africa towards backable biotech startups. So before I welcome Marco on, just to give a bit of guidance to what we're going to be speaking about, following on from the chat with Richard and Joni about kind of the investor's lens on the early stage team, as well as just how that early stage team can go about doing their own due diligence. But first, we want to hear really OBVS, OneBio's perspective in how they evaluate early stage teams, as well as their idea, what the due diligence process looks like, and some advice maybe of what founders can do before approaching for investment, gaps that founders often miss, things that people overlook before they come to you to start raising. And then, as I mentioned, being able to run the same scrutiny on your idea first so that you can identify any questions that might come up. And then for the audience listening, a bit of a question to think for yourself. If an investor had to ask you why your founding team, and why now, could you answer this honestly, and would you know the gaps in your own idea? So I'm going to welcome Marco on to do a bit more of an introduction to himself, what OneBio is doing, and then take us through the whole due diligence process. I know, Marco, you were on for the previous conversation with Richard and Joni, so we can also follow on from some points there, and you can reflect it from the other side of the table.
Fantastic. Hannah, thank you very much for having me. And yeah, it was really nice being part of the session earlier with Richard and Joni. Fantastic. Sure, I'll maybe kick off with a bit of an intro. Thanks. I think you've already done a great job. I'll get the Italian name out the way again real quick, just to be sure. So Gian-marco Melfi, but please, everyone calls me Marco. Yeah, maybe just to lay the groundwork for those who I haven't met yet. I'm hoping many of those who are on the call have been to a Biotech in Biz, and perhaps we've met in the past. But yeah, I'm a South African. I got to study at Stellenbosch for probably 1 year too many. Moved to the UK to do my master's up at Edinburgh University. Beyond that, the next kind of role I had was with Gyroscope Therapeutics, which you mentioned. I was a junior scientist, but getting to work in a really cool organization that I think we'll touch on a little bit later when we start talking about venture building. And then spent around 4 years working for Cambridge University, setting up the Milner Therapeutics Institute, essentially a different model in trying to get academia and pharma to work more closely together with the intention of spinning out and starting up more therapeutics and diagnostics companies. We can touch on that a little bit more as well. And then the last gig before moving back to South Africa was with Zap Therapeutics, early stage cell therapy company, doing some really cool work, and then joined OneBio, I think it's just over 4 years ago now, as an investment principal. Joined the fund, about 4 years ago when we were still deploying our first fund. And subsequently, we've, as you mentioned, started to raise our second. We've established the OneBio Innovation Center, which Hannah and Aaron and Roddy are running with, as well as the new element, which is this venture building program that I'm happy to elaborate on.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the intro. You wear many hats, which is great for this kind of conversation, perspective from all sides. So to start off, maybe you can just explain the due diligence process from your guys' side. Obviously, you're a relatively new fund, maybe. But so far, what has your experience been with evaluating founding teams? How important is the team? What are some of the first things you look at? And maybe just if I was a new founder coming to you, what would be the first things that you look at?
Sure. I think maybe I'll go even higher level just to start, kind of what our VC fund is and its mechanism, because I think our due diligence process, once you know the kind of constraints, for lack of a better term, a VC fund is under, the kinds of elements that are important for due diligence and the ideas that we look at, I think become a bit clearer. So maybe just as a very kind of high level overview, traditionally funds are time constrained, have got time constraints on them. So essentially, the traditional model, 10 years, maybe 11, 12 years is the lifetime of a fund, right? Standard breakdown, the first 5 years, once you've closed the fund, once you've raised it, is to now go and commit that capital. You've got 5 years to make investments. The subsequent 5 plus 1, traditionally, so 7 in total, is where you're looking to exit those investments, obviously for significant multiples, returning more capital than you initially raised. The DD process kind of is part of that first 5 year process. There are elements of DD in the second half, but we don't have to touch on to that as well. A due diligence process is essentially getting to know founders in the company, right, at its core. From our point of view, our due diligence process kind of tends to kick off with someone reaching out to us. It does also happen that we reach out to a company we identify, but we're quite fortunate that because we're one of the only active biotech VCs on the continent, we're lucky enough to have a lot of organic kind of deal flow, people reaching out to us who are raising money. But maybe just at a high level view, we tend to ask in the first instance, if someone reaches out, that they share an info deck in the first case, and we can unpack what we think a good info deck looks like or not. Essentially, that's a screening tool for us to determine whether the opportunity is within mandate or not. So again, maybe I'll go a bit high level from OneBio. Essentially, we invest in the theme of kind of One Health. Is this potential opportunity, this business, the startup, going to have an impact either in human, planetary, or animal health, or an interlinked group of those three? So by getting an info deck early, if you do happen to be a fintech who's come to the wrong door, or we could say, unfortunately, this isn't for us, but, speak to such and such and such and such. So the info deck stage is really an initial screener. But in the same breath, it's kind of important, right? it needs to be good. You want to impress investors with your idea. So, 2 slides that are a bit shabby is not selling yourselves well. And we've had a number of those in the past. But info deck stage. Then, if it is within mandate, we tend to set up a first, intro call, actually get to meet the founding team on the other side. And I think Richard touched on this earlier. We really are looking at the team at a pre-seed stage. The idea and the approach, at least, or the problem being solved, is very, very important that we look at. But yeah, the kind of those 2 elements: what problem is being solved, and do we think this team stands a good chance of solving it, are probably the first cause. And then, maybe just a higher level over the rest of the DD process. Once we've found some kind of internal conviction, right? We've spent enough time with the founders. We understand their business. We think it's a good investment opportunity. We start going a little bit deeper into elements depending on the business, right? Looking at the business case, really understanding the nuts and bolts. Where are you going? How are you trying to build this? Looking at things like exits. Where would they come? Is it a secondary? Is this an acquisition target potentially? And maybe I'll leave that. It's quite loose. It's just the kind of bare bones of what a DD looks like. But I'll add one more element that I think makes it clearer when we're talking about DD now. There's a second part of that process. The first is us as a fund, as the partners in the fund, wanting to gain conviction that this is a good idea. This is a team we want to back. And the second half that is equally important, and sometimes founders, especially if you're just thinking about starting a company, is what that information is also then used for. Right? We, as Nick and Marco, we're the partners of the fund. We don't ultimately make the decision on who we invest in. We pitch those. We essentially become advocates for these, or cheerleaders for these ideas that we think are great, and we pitch them to an independent committee. So, if a fund is ever asking you lots and lots of questions and you're getting a bit sick of them asking loads of questions, it's not just for their understanding. It's so that they're trying to build a case to whatever their committee or investment approval structure looks like. I think that sometimes is missed by founders. It's not just us being interested in asking too many.
And maybe then, before we get into kind of the venture build side and what founders can do to refine their idea before coming to you, a little bit more on the team side, because we speak about this time and time again. How often is it that a kind of idea comes through past your desk, and you think this is maybe not a great idea, this needs some refinement, but then you meet the team and you really think that there's some hands-on work that could be done with them? How much more is there a different due diligence process then of, okay, cool, do you just send them away and say your idea needs some refinement, come back to us at a time that's maybe it fits our mandate a bit better, but we really believe in your team and you as a founder? Or is there a lot more hands-on work that goes on? How much do you lean on now the venture building side and funneling potential founders into that? So kind of speak about the interlink there, how you're doing that matchmaking process.
Yeah, happily. So, for the first couple of years of Fund 1, maybe even higher level, traditionally a VC would sit, especially a pre-seed or a seed, early stage VC would sit, and, frankly, you get to just wait for the best opportunities either to come to you or go and find them and invest in those. And what it looks like, or obviously there needs to be a company registered, there already needs to be a team, they've got a good business plan, they've got a data room describing how they're going to go after this particular problem. It's quite a lot there, even at a pre-seed stage, right? So we've never been a traditional VC in that sense. We've always gone even earlier when we find teams and or ideas that we find really exciting. So in the first fund, we did do some elements of venture building which plug in exactly there, right? We'd met some really interesting prospective founders that had come with ideas that maybe the idea wasn't quite in mandate, or it wasn't really kind of VC backable enough. They were going after a very small market. You kind of name it, the elements there that weren't quite right. But we really liked the teams. And then we, in addition to our fund management roles, would kind of step in as Nick and I to now work with them over, sometimes it's 3 months, sometimes it's been more than a year, to try and shape up an idea that is, in our view, kind of VC backable. And that was essentially our venture builder approach. in addition to that in-house ideation. So we had ideas of our own that we wanted to build out, and we went to go look for founders that resonate with that idea, that would want to build with that idea, and then venture build that idea. So two kind of streams. The fundamental change now is that we've been awarded a grant facility to really kind of kickstart and hire in some more what we've titled EIRs, or entrepreneurs in residence, who can really take the steer in that engagement, whether it's with a founder who doesn't even have an idea yet, or the beginnings of an idea that isn't shaped up, prospective founder, and get to work with them, or their own in-house ideas, our ideas that we are kind of shaping up and building into business plans and finding prospective founders. So the dividing line is quite clear. The fund can get involved, once there is a really good idea of the team that's building something, that there is a business plan, that it's clear the problem that they're going after and how they intend to go after it. Anything that needs that work still, or any of those early stage pieces of work, the Venture Studio and Venture Build team are ideally placed to engage there. So I hope that kind of delineates where the fund kind of activities begin, and the venture building is really from day 0, day -1, right? Really.
Yeah, definitely. I think as we're speaking, it's kind of bringing in all of the previous conversations that we've had on the series. So even going back to the session before this, where we were speaking to your partner, Nick Walker, and Nick Ensland from Immobizyme. And we were speaking a lot about kind of how to go about this market-driven research, right? And how a lot of people who are founders in the biotech space maybe have a very technical background, are scientists, lay a lot of priority on figuring out the technical side, the scientific integrity of it and everything. Maybe you can speak a little bit more about, now obviously we know founding team, very important. Investors look a lot at the soft skills, the people who are building this, and whether they can whether they have the resilience to go forward with this journey. But then going into, okay, you have a great scientific idea, you think it's really strong. What are the ways that they can pressure test these ideas? Something Nick Ensland mentioned was he can't stress enough how important those early stage conversations are with potential commercial partners or people in the actual industry. So maybe just some advice from your perspective before coming to an investor. How important is it to have had those conversations and to have kind of stress tested the science against what the market actually needs? And is that something that the venture building team is thinking about doing as well?
Yeah, a lot to unpack there, but happy to. From the kind of stress testing the science point of view, there's an umbrella kind of like over that. Obviously, science is intended to solve a particular problem, right? And I think really understanding problem that you are looking to solve is one of the biggest kind of gaps or kind of oversights. I think when in academia, when you're doing your master's, your PhD, your postdoc, you name it, you get the bandwidth to ask scientific questions that you're looking to answer, not necessarily pinned to a large market that could be commercially viable. You're not building a company yet necessarily in academia. So what we look for really early on is not just can the science work, it's, well, so what? What is that science going to contribute to? What problem is it going to solve? And it's an important part of our DD process. Alongside the team, it's really how well does the team understand the problem that they're going after, and how large is the associated market if they were going to get this right. If they get this right, what is the commercial return look like? So when we say pressure test the science, I think, almost more important to the process or samples you'll need or technologies you'll pick off shelves and build, your tech with, is what problem you're going after. And I often feel like a broken record. It's the first bit of feedback we tend to give kind of prospective founders is, do we, and really kind of push on the problem. Do we understand the problem well enough?
Awesome. Before continuing on from that, I'm gonna just read out a question that came up in the chat. So someone stated, I guess the aim of OneBio is for the startups to become successful while still working with them. How do you, I guess, empower or set them up for success? Is due diligence the only way?
That's a really good question. So the answer is we definitely do more than just DD. So maybe actually paint a bit of a historical picture here could be useful. If you had asked that question 2.5 to 3 years ago, I think there'd be elements of truth there. Due diligence, engaging with founders, spending time with them was really the core. It was essentially Nick and I in an office, right? And whatever we could do in our capacities to support a prospective founder, ideally in an investable opportunity, right? We're always looking for founders that we'd look to back with the fund. What's happened since is a number of elements to do a lot more for prospective founders. So the OneBio Innovation Center, is a huge. This session, the fact that this is happening is all thanks to the OBIC, which its day in and day out is to support founders. The fact we're having this conversation, that there's a multi-million-dollar lab that's accessible to startups, biotech and beers events to go and meet others, and now the latest kind of revitalized approach in venture building. As I say, we have done venture builds before, but now we're able to capacitate a team. So you've got all three of these areas where we look to support founders.
Yeah, and I think that's really important for founders to realize. Sometimes there can be this kind of curtain between investors and founders, and people often guessing what you're looking for at the early stages. And something Richard also mentioned earlier is for early stage teams, or if you're thinking of an idea, is to really speak to investors, even if you think it is too soon. If you do believe that you really want to go into this, you have the ambition, and you have a really strong founding team, do you think that that is kind of a way to pressure test, is to speak to investors at quite an early stage, maybe when you're not quite ready, just to help you refine that idea? Is that something that OneBio does? Or now that you're getting a lot busier, obviously it's a little bit more difficult to be hands-on. But would you suggest that, not being too scared to come when you think it might be too early, just either for really early advice or for a bit of direction steering towards something that can help you um, better prepare yourself?
Yeah, most definitely. I think with our approach, and again, I'm just speaking from a OneBio point of view, not other VCs of other processes and ways of doing what they do. But yeah, I don't think there is, a scenario of too early to engage with us, whether it be, directly to the fund. And again, we'll get a sense quite quickly if this is something better placed for the venture builder team, which we're also a part of, or if you're ready and at a stage where kind of direct fund and let's consider moving into DD is now the time or not. So yeah, I definitely think reaching out to funds earlier rather than later is important. I think when you're doing that, and I'm thinking now on a lens that perhaps it's not us that you're going to speak to, but you're welcome to, is you do just want to be as prepared as possible, right? Show that you've done some research, that you're passionate, that maybe even put together some materials already. Do whatever you can to be, coming across, I'm very on the front foot. I really want to build something, and I appreciate some of your time. So definitely reach out early. The other element is you don't have to go straight to a fund. Finding key opinion leaders in your particular space, right? Whether those be local academics, international academics, friend of a friend of a friend who happen to work in a company quite similar to what you're building. You name it. Part of becoming a good founder is the ability to build relationships and your network. What better way to show that you are capable of doing that when you come and speak to a funder, you get to kind of list off all the other people, organizations, teams, other founders that you've already spoken to and tried to get feedback from, right? I think it's a really strong signal if someone comes in having already trying to push out their network into the space.
Yeah, I am always interested in how kind of soft skills comes to the forefront time and time again, especially in this field. The importance of just having conversations and really getting yourself into the relevant networks as soon as possible, and not being shy to have those difficult conversations and almost do your own kind of scrutiny and your own idea quite early on. A question that came up now is, if the team is a primary consideration, do you, OneBio, therefore facilitate the process of pairing idea people, solo individuals with an appropriate team? Is this advisably done before or after the registration of the company and acquiring seed funding? So a very good question for the venture build side.
Yeah, a kind of a lot to unpack there. So actually worth mentioning, I think Richard brought it up in the earlier session. We don't tend to invest in solo founders for I think many of the reasons that were covered in the previous session. It's exceptionally challenging to build any startup. And trying to do that alone is really tough. So we don't tend to invest in individual founders. So yeah, we have in the past identified prospective founders for ideas and tried to matchmake and see if that worked out. We've had success in that approach. Generally, that was kind of before company registration. But to be honest with you, that's whether it's before or post, I think it's still an activity we'd be happy to engage on. So long as this is an opportunity of interest, this aligns with our mandates. I don't think I'd do very well trying to match you if you're building a fintech with a fintech founder. But as long as it's a scientific and biotech kind of approach, yeah, I mean, we can definitely, whether it be through the venture build process, I think it probably fits more squarely there. But we tap into all of our network respectively at OneBio to see, is there someone we could introduce you to or put you in touch with?
Awesome. And then maybe from the venture building side, if it is something that you can speak about, but how is that kind of model going about finding both sides of this coin, right? Finding really investable ideas, finding great research, and then finding founders. A very difficult part of our job, even at the Innovation Center, is finding people in this network. It's not something you can find online. Often it comes through the personal networks that you have, what is in your kind of proximity, and really doing the digging and friends of friends of friends to find the right people. How has that been in the early stages of setting up the venture build?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've captured it pretty well. But yeah, from an ideas point of view, so all of us have the ability to look wherever great science is coming out, right? That's not only local universities. We are lucky that our local universities are producing some really interesting stuff. But we're looking as far afield as necessary. Through networks. So I've got some friends at Cambridge that are working on some interesting ideas, and there could be technology that we could license from there. You name it. So the net is almost infinitely broad of where we look for ideas. And then also kind of de novo ideation, right? We've had an idea around a specific problem for a while, and the beauty of the venture build model is you by the fact that you have a team, you're not doing that ideation in a silo, right? You have a team in-house here that you can bounce ideas off walls until something sticks. And that's the fundamental difference, I think, in the advantage of the venture build model, that you've got other opinions in the room from day dot, right? That can either ask the tough questions that you might not be asking yourself if it's your idea and it's your kind of baby. No one wants to have it picked apart, but also can bounce things off you that is maybe a field or an area that you're not an expert in, but you become one through kind of desktop research as best you can, or your network. So from an idea point of view, yeah, lots of routes to roam there of how we pick good ideas. I'm going to sound like a broken record again because I think it's worth repeating. Problem first. We as scientists, I think, get excited by shiny pieces of tech or a paper that's come out, and it's fine to get excited. If you enjoy science, you probably enjoy reading about it, but it's immediately shifting to, okay, well, how could this be utilized, and what is the problem that could be solved, and is that a big enough market? Reasons for that, again, I don't know if we've touched on it previously, but the VC model is the reason. Often we find founders who are pitching ideas, and there could be some very interesting science going on, but it's addressing a problem that's associated with a particularly small market, and all of a sudden that's a very tough VC investment to make. So yeah, we have to think bigger. We have to think of solving global problems, ideally with locally built solutions, with technology from local universities or our own ideation or from abroad, you name it. But we need to be going after large enough problems. So I hope that kind of helps paint the picture. In terms of people and finding prospective founders, platforms like this is fantastic. Hopefully there are 20 odd prospective founders on the call right now who'd be interested in or are interested in wanting to build and could be interested in the Venture Build program. Spending time at local universities, reaching into our own networks, going for coffees, you name it. We're always looking out for people who are interested in entrepreneurship and biotech and want to engage.
Maybe if we kind of flip it and give a bit of advice from maybe some of the audience's perspective. If I'm a solo founder, I am yet to find, or maybe I'm in that process of finding a good team, but I have a really interesting problem and a technology that fits that problem. I'm looking for a founder. I'm getting into the networks and that at that really early stage. Is this an opportunity for me to come to OneBio, or would you really hope that I'm a little bit further along? I've found someone, we've started building on it. How far along and what kind of materials would you want me to have prepared before coming towards you? And what is some of the things that I could do that you would give advice for? What are some of the things that I could do to better prepare myself before that?
Yeah. So yeah, I think if it's really early on in your kind of ideation, as you mentioned, you've identified a problem, you have an idea of, you don't have to have the technology. I think as a pre-seed investor, we don't expect someone to have loads of data they've already generated. If you do, fantastic. Come and chat to us. We'd love to have a look. And if you are further along, that's fine. As I say, to a pre-seed or a seed stage. But, you've got a problem that you're passionate about solving. You have an idea of a technical approach that is competitive, you believe, to go after it. 100%. You're welcome to come and chat to us. And I think we'd spend some time with the Venture Build hat on, kind of dissecting where we are and where could we go with this. Is this something we could work with you on? From the fund point of view, generally speaking, there is a team in place. If it is just a solo founder, but you've already done a lot of the hard yards of building out a business plan, you have an info deck, you've started to put together a data room, you've spoken to a lot of people, that's fine. One of our first pieces of feedback will be, well, we need to find you another founder, and let's brainstorm on how we go about that. But yeah, ideally, the first kickoff from a fund point of view, the kind of bare minimum, if you want to chat to the fund, is an info deck describing the team and your problem that you're solving and the approach. So, frankly, I think we're not scary people. I think rather come and chat sooner rather than later. We tend to add more value the earlier on in the conversation we kind of step in, or get to have a conversation rather than later. So if you're unsure, I'd rather come early. Right. Then I could paint a beautiful picture of everything's perfectly structured. The deck is amazing. You've got a huge network. Of course, you're welcome to speak to us in that case. But if you're not in that boat, totally fine to come and speak to us early, and we could point you in the right directions.
Awesome. So I'm going to wait for people to add a few more questions in the chat, but maybe around this as well. Are there any kind of hard resources that you can point people towards? Are there any kind of, where can people look for these kind of resources of how to get prepared? Do you guys have any sort of repository that you look at in your process? I think people are always just looking at where they can go to find more information, where they can go to get better prepared, who they can have conversations with. So besides coming to OneBio to pick your brain all the time, where could you suggest people look?
Sure. I mean, I'd encourage the latter. Come and have a chat, because again, before it's much easier to have a conversation when there's some tangibles or what it is you're trying to build going on, right? But I think, in terms of hard resources, I mean, if you think about 4 years ago, these large language models and AI tools, didn't exist really. If they did, I'll be honest, I was not an adopter 4 years ago. So I think there is actually a wealth of knowledge you can tap into if you can wrap your head around some ChatGPT prompts or working with Claude, you name it. So yeah, in terms of hard resource, easy stuff, like if you're wanting to understand kind of the VC model, there's some great YouTube videos, frankly, that'll explain to you what a safe note is and, how a priced round is put together, at least just the high level kind of information. So yeah, tough to point to other hard resources off the top of my head. Right
Well, I
now,
mean,
I'd say,
this answer leads really well into the next question on the chat. So you were speaking about um, the new kind of LLMs and the new age of AI advancing so rapidly. A question in the chat is about AI. With AI advancing so rapidly, especially in recent months, has this changed what you're looking for in a startup?
good question. I don't think fundamentally changed, but I think a theme that we've always had within this One Health mandate, right? We're looking at human, planetary, and animal health. Is we've always been interested in companies who part of their solution, part of solving a large problem, is the need or already having access to large data sets. Right. So a number of our portfolio, and again, our portfolio is on our website. You'll pick out some of these themes if you're keen to have a look. Is wherever large biological data sets are being produced, different ML approaches, different AI models are becoming more and more sophisticated into teasing out actionable insights from those data sets. So it's probably, actually, to be fair, it's probably a theme we're getting more and more exposure to. We've had a couple of companies, majority of our companies have got an element of kind of handling big data, whether that be through a machine learning process or proprietary process of their own, you name it. So yeah, I think it's definitely a theme that's not going anywhere for the now. I think the potential power of some of these tools is really yet to be seen. The one thing we are allergic to is just slapping AI onto the tin, because the sense is if you don't have an AI angle, you're not going to raise money. As long as it's thoughtful, that there is a really strong rationale as to how you'd be using AI, I think that's great. But I think there are certain founders or prospective founders that, you just have to have it on the deck. Otherwise, you're not going to get looked at. We've seen a few kind of slip into that trap, which is probably far from ideal.
Mm. I mean, beyond AI as kind of like a tool in the work that you're doing, keeping on this theme of what you guys are looking to invest in. I know you mentioned the One Health model, human, animal, and planetary health. Are there specific interest fields right now that you think are global problems that you're really interested in companies coming forward to solve? And also within your own ideation, what are the specific problems that you're really interested in right now that you can see globally?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it actually touches quite nicely on Richard and Joni's conversation earlier about when you're starting a founding team, the different skill sets. Frankly, it's very similar in a fund, right? There's certain areas that I find really appealing. There's certain areas that Nick finds really appealing, and Wani, Kumo, our venture build team. There'll be certain areas that we focus on. So from my point of view, or maybe just to share one or two. I think the diversity on the continent, whether that be human or animal diversity, plant diversity in particular, biodiversity generally, how we utilize that in the drug discovery world has always been of interest, right? And this is also reflected in our portfolio. So, if you're interested in better mechanisms of finding better drug targets, right? Whether that be through a human genetics approach, or you're interested in chemistries and finding interesting chemistries from natural botanicals or from you name it. I think the kind of biodiscovery approach on the continent, there are elements of, and there's some cool startups doing things in there, but I think there's a lot of space left to explore there. So as a kind of general theme, I think that's the one that I'm really interested in, and I've seen some interesting stuff come out of.
Awesome. So again, it comes down to an important team, right? Having a diverse skill sets and having diverse interests within a team really cast your net a little bit wider. But I mean, I'm going to encourage anyone who has some more questions to leave them in the chat while we kind of naturally close this off. But I mean, is there any, and is there any other kind of things that you see founders really missing before coming to you? What is your kind of final takeaway of this whole refining your idea? Obviously, both of these are really difficult topics to pin down and very subjective and dependent on what the team is, what you're building, what you're looking at, what stage you're at. But just general themes that you see the local context of founders and teams missing maybe before they come to you, and what a broad brushstroke of advice would be around your preparations in the early stages.
Yeah, again, completely at risk of sounding like a broken record. Really understanding the problem exceptionally hard before you engage with a fund is probably the most critical one, because we see it so often that founders haven't really dug into the size of the problem and competitors in that space, other technologies that could be and could already be tracking towards solving this problem, and kind of where you place them versus your approach. Yeah, we are problem kind of centric. Yeah, I mean, I'd say, not worrying about too much of the technicals too early with a pre-seed and seed investor. Sure, if you are confident enough to have done a techno-economic model, that's fantastic. If you haven't, that's something that we would like to, we can assist with. So it's really just getting the fundamentals right. You've already touched on this. I think the previous session's done really well. Your team, do as much work you can in putting together a team yourself as far as possible, building out your network. That you can confidently say, I've spoken to these opinion leaders. This is the feedback we've had from here or there so far. I think is really important. Really looking at the problem. Yeah, I mean, I think those are the cores. Like, we don't expect things that are every I is dotted and every T is crossed. But I think if it's clear that a lot of effort and time and energy and thought, real deep thought, has been applied, that immediately sounds to me like a founder we'd like to spend a bit more time with and work with. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, and how much does that kind of question come up even with your IC of, okay, this is a strong team. What kind of questions or what kind of work do you look for in that they've understood their problem? Do you really ask questions of, okay, how long have you gone out there? Who have you spoken to? Where have you been?
Yeah,
And how have you tackled really getting into the flesh of this problem? Or is it
yeah,
just, oh, we think that this is a great problem and we've done our own kind of desk research and spoken to a few people locally? Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
how deep do you dig into that?
Yeah, so I mean, we'll ask as many fundamental questions as possible, right? I mean, sometimes easier to do this with an example, but let's say it's a particular disease state that you're going after. We'll do the desktop research, right, during the DD process. So we'll try and get ourselves up to speed, either desktop research, reaching out to our own network to understand the problem, kind of alongside. So we never take the information only at face value. Oh, you say it's a big problem. Cool. No, we'll have a look and we'll ask questions around that. So yeah, one way is that's quite easy is, have you identified competitors in the space? Right. If you haven't done so, that's going to be one of the first things we look at once we understand the problem you're going after. Like, who else is going after this? And that can take some digging and some teasing out to kind of find. So yeah, we will ask the questions. It's always intended, to come out with more knowledge, respectively. We don't do that, DD, to catch someone out. To be, oh, you haven't done X. It'll be, have you considered why we've found this? What are your thoughts? We tend to be kind of more constructive in it. But yeah, the tough questions are important to try and answer. And if you don't have answers yet, often that's fine. But it's just highlighted that there's a space that we need to work on.
Mm-hmm. A few more questions in the chats, which is actually quite an interesting one. With many years in VC, what lessons have you learned that you have applied or trying to apply to become a better VC?
Great question. So many years in VC is maybe a push. I don't know if I'd say 4 years is many just yet. Still fairly early doors. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, if you look at the model, of what a VC should do, you are trying to make the most high conviction bets possible, right, within the time that you have. So I think what has naturally and kind of fundamentally changed for us, which is definitely I think for the positive, is the amount of additional support we can provide, right? We used to, due to kind of resource constraints and human capacity constraints, we couldn't engage with some ideas. We just had to say, sorry, we don't have the capacity. That's no longer the case. In terms of becoming better, I think expanding our network, right? We're doing this. So we do practice what we preach. We ask founders to really work hard in building out their network in the early doors. We as fund managers are doing the exact same thing continuously, right? Reaching out to other funds, learning lessons from them, where they have gone wrong, where they've had success. And that does take time. That does take time. Building those relationships with other funds, another funders, doesn't even have to be VC. I think takes a lot of time, and all of those lessons learned can kind of culminate into a thesis of your own, or push your thesis around. So I think time and energy, more deals made. There'll be wins, there'll be losses, but as long as we continually expanding our network, extending that out, learning where we've gone wrong, I think we're trucking in the right direction. And in 4 years, I think I know. We as an organization have learned a hell of a lot, and that's exponential, right? That keeps going.
And then maybe regarding kind of the importance of your network as well, something we spoke about is really understanding your problem, right? And if you're maybe an early stage founder, yes, you have good technical background, you understand kind of a problem technology fit. How much do you even lean into your expert network? An idea might come across your table that you don't have a personal background in, but that's quite difficult for founders too, I can imagine, where they don't really have the network of experts that they can lean into to really stress test this, pressure test this. Is it something that you can offer where you think the problem is really great, they might have a technology fit for this? Can you offer any sort of network beyond your IC even to really go and pressure test the idea a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, most definitely. If we meet a prospective founder and that they're, we're in that conversation that there is something to be done here, we'll tap into our networks as far as possible if we think there's a mutually beneficial intro to be made, right? Or someone who's really passionate about the space that we've known for some time, or not. So yeah, happy to make intros where it makes sense to do so. Completely. We during a DD process will often reach out to people in our network where we're not, super well versed in the space, and we're happy to make those kinds of connections to prospective founders of interest, if need be. That's not a problem.
Awesome. One more question in the chat is, what would your advice be for someone who has identified a problem, has an idea, but is not sure their approach is possible? Can someone come to OneBio to sort of bounce ideas off of, or would you guys be open to starting a brainstorming networking session?
Interesting. I mean, I think most founders, if you're going after something quite ambitious in a large market that's solving a big problem, if you had 110% confidence that your solution was going to work, I mean, I'd love to chat anyway, but often, there's a couple of leaps of faith and R&D that need to come through for the positive to prove out that this approach works. But just to answer your question, happy to have a conversation. I think bouncing ideas is completely fine. Maybe just, you'll maybe note I haven't gone into many kind of examples that our company X did Y or didn't do Y. We do, any conversations we have here are treated confidentially. So if you're happy to come and have a chat and we throw things around, more than happy to. I think especially with the venture build team now as well, it's not just three of us kind of that can provide input. There are some more colleagues who have got experience of their own that could contribute. So happy to.
Awesome. Well, if anyone has a burning question, now is your time. We're going to end off the session. I mean, a bit of an overview for the theme today really is how important that initial team is. how much investors really do look at the potential of founders over maybe the strength of the technology. And from this, I will also encourage you all to look at some of the networking opportunities. If you are looking at finding a team and really starting to brainstorm with people around your problem and your technology fit, we are trying to curate that as much as possible. We have many networking events coming up. A new initiative as part of this series is the Meet Your Co-founder, which I'll mention in a second. We do have the first date for that coming up. And then just realizing that really early on, try and lean on this network that we're building and this ecosystem. We're trying to create a community of people who can go through the whole brainstorming and really pressure testing and refining together. So yeah, lean into the OneBio community and keep an eye on the in-person events coming up. But Marco, thank you so much for your perspective. I think we'll probably chat a little bit more deeply about the VC process and approaching for funding at a later stage in the series. So we'll probably see your face again. But thank you so much. If people do have any questions, please do email info@innovation.onebio.africa, and we can guide your questions towards the fund team as well as the venture building team. Otherwise, keep an eye out on what they're doing online and on LinkedIn. Some really exciting things coming up. Yeah, Marco, thank you so much.
Thanks.
We will chat to you soon.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And just before we head off, I'm going to quickly share my screen. So I mentioned we're going to be having some Meet Your Co-founder events. We have Hendon the 6th of August, which is actually around the corner, as our first tester of this. We'll be doing an in-person event in Cape Town. I know many of you on the series are not from Cape Town, so we will be organizing some curated online kind of meetups and networking opportunities so that you can start chatting to people who are part of the series, as well as some other some other networks that we'll invite. Our aim here is to really pair complementary people. So we will really try and cast our net wide and get some more business people, basically just casting our net a little bit wider than purely the life sciences scientists out there, and give you just an opportunity to start bouncing ideas off of each other and start expanding your own networks. As I mentioned before, sorry, let me stop sharing. As I've mentioned before on the series, we really are just trying to create a platform for all of you to do the harder work, which is expanding your network, starting to speak about your idea, really leaning into the resources that we're putting out there. So the series really is what you make of it. If you haven't joined our Slack yet, you can also email us to get a link to join your Slack. We encourage you all to make use of this. This is a space for you to reach out to peers and colleagues, to share resources and to organize your own side events, your own networking events. So please introduce yourself in the introductions channel on Slack, and hopefully that'll start encouraging a conversation around complementary skills. You might identify someone there that you want to speak to. You might be thinking of starting the same idea. But for now, thank you all for joining this session. It'll be recorded and sent to you. Our next session will be on the 22nd of July, where we dive a little bit deeper into the technical side of starting a company from a legal perspective. Awesome. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much. See you next time.